Verhei. Joining me as always, Football Outsiders editor-in-chief Aaron Schatz, Football Outsiders contributing writer Bryan Knowles, and we are just going to jump right into things today because we have a lot to talk about, especially about the running game. There has been a big resurgence in the running game in the NFL in 2022, and it may have peaked in Week 12 over Thanksgiving, starting with these Philadelphia Eagles. Bryan, talk to me a little bit about how the Eagles just trampled the Packers.
It was amazing. On Sunday night, it seemed like everything the Eagles did was a run, and every single run had like 3 missed tackles and went 12 yards downfield. The Eagles rushed for 363 yards, which is the 7th most since the merger. We have seventh. It's also 7th most since the passing rules changed in 1978. That's the big one there. Jalen Hurts became the 4th player in NFL history with both 150 yards passing and rushing in the same game. And the last time the Eagles managed a 360-yard rushing game was in 1948 on their way to an NFL championship. It was just an absolute pounding of the Packers run game over and over. And Joe Barry was trending on Twitter very quickly, and not exactly for positive reasons. Everyone and their brother wanted him fired after that game.
I just want to say that I went into that game needing Miles Sanders to outscore Deontay Johnson to win my fantasy matchup. He did.
A nail biter.
I'm happy for your success. You talked about the raw total of team rushing yards there, and the 7 other teams to do it. It actually happened last year. The Ravens, of course, had 404 yards against the Bengals, but some of these other teams and some of these other players, the big rushing stars we have seen over the past, really, was this 3.5 decades?
The thing is, most of these other games were like one running back came close to setting the record. Like Corey Dillon, I think, set the record in 2000 for rushing yards, and so the team had over 400 rushing yards. And Adrian Peterson then set the record in 2007 against the Chargers. So the Chargers had a bunch of rushing yards. But this was like 4 guys.
This was everyone coming from every angle, and the Packers just had no answers for everybody. And it feels like every time there's a huge rushing game recently, especially when a quarterback's involved, it's been the Packers just flopping all over the field trying to catch people.
Many years ago, I don't know how many, but I wrote the Packers chapter in Football Outsiders Almanac and discussed their struggles stopping quarterback runs. And it's a franchise thing. They've had many regimes in there, but they gave up the record to Colin Kaepernick in the playoffs. They lost home to Michael Vick in the playoffs. It's been a theme for the Green Bay Packers franchise for a long, long time. They are vulnerable to quarterback runs, and I don't really know why.
They actually were really low in the number of scrambles against them going into this game.
Oh.
I wrote about it at ESPN Chalk, and I was like, I guess the Packers don't really allow quarterbacks. Their pass rush isn't good enough to force quarterbacks to scramble that much. But Hurts had to scramble, and when he did, he just got these colossal chunks of yardage. Now, I'll point out, by the way, the Eagles did not have the best rushing DVOA of the week of any team. But there's 2 main reasons for that. The first is that those scrambles count as passes, not as runs when it comes to team DVOA. And the other is opponent adjustments. So Cincinnati actually had the highest run DVOA of the week because they played Tennessee, and Tennessee is the number 1 run defense in the league. But I will point out that if you changed the Jalen Hurts scrambles from passes to runs, the Eagles would have had a run team DVOA of 54% for the week.
And while the Titans are the toughest run defense in the league, the Packers are now officially the worst run defense in the league. This game knocked them down below the Browns to get into 30.
And that's saying something because the Browns' run defense has been awful, and the Chargers' run defense has given up a lot of yards, but in DVOA they're not like the worst in the league.
I will add the Texans in there. I've been watching the Texans and Browns kind of flip-flop for the worst place run defense, and now Green Bay has passed them both and passed the Chargers, who are also one way or another terrible in run defense. So Yeah, it's a fascinating race to the bottom there for those who care
Just
about
give more
such things.
props to Jeffrey Simmons and the Titans for being able to stop runs, man. At least somebody can this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a Samaje Perine tops in rushing value among running backs, not Josh Jacobs, who we'll get to here shortly. But Samaje Perine, the first running back to score a rushing touchdown against the Tennessee Titans since week 1. And 58 yards doesn't sound like much. I think it was 58, whatever he had. It was the most against the Titans by a running back since Josh Jacobs in week 3. So you ask how, not you guys specifically, but viewers ask, how are the Titans always winning these ugly games? And the answer is they absolutely do not let you run the ball on them. And so even if you have the advantage, you can't kill clock, and this keeps them in close games and gives them a chance to win at the end, assuming they don't do a dumb penalty on a field goal attempt.
Seattle also goes in that list of bad run defenses from this year, which gets us to the Josh Jacobs game, which I think really surprised people in quick reads because Josh Jacobs was #1 running back of the week, but despite having 303 scrimmage yards, he did not have historical quick reads numbers at all.
No.
Yeah. One of the people shocked by that was me, because I put together all these numbers, for the show, and I just assumed going in that Jacobs was going to have triple-digit running value. He's going to be on we'll run the list of the most valuable running games of all time, and so on and so forth. Not even close. Not even close. Despite having the 8th most rushing yards, the 8th most yards from scrimmage in NFL history, he only had 45 DYIR. Which that's crazy. I mean, just some of the other big names. Flipper Anderson's record-breaking game. That's 160 DYAR. The Adrian Peterson 300-yard rushing game. That was 94 DYAR. Priest Holmes had 152 in his 300-yard games. Calvin Johnson had 111. All the usually when you see these huge numbers, they show up huge in the advanced stats too. But Jacobs, I mean, it was a good day. Don't get us wrong. There's nothing you can't shrug at 45 DYAR. But it wasn't even the best of the week.
It was rushing wise, it was not the best of the week. But in total DYAR, it was not among the top 20 games this year, which really stunned me. But a big part of it, is that it's the Seahawks defense, which has had some extreme mood swings, going from one of the worst defenses for about 6 weeks to one of the best for a month or so, and now appears to have fallen back to the other end of the spectrum, being one of the worst again. Who knows what's going to happen going forward if they keep playing like this? We're going to see a lot more several 100-yard games against the Seahawks. If they return back to their mid-October, early November form, we're not going to see very many more. But that's a big part of it. The other part of it is that DYAR and DVOA really like efficiency and reliability. And Josh Jacobs was explosive, but he was not particularly reliable or efficient. Half of his rushing yards on the day came in as 2 touchdown runs. If you take away those 2 plays, he had 31 carries, averaged something like 3.5 yards a carry. A lot of short yards going nowhere. A lot of stuffs in the backfield. A lot of failures to convert in short yardage. So it just kind of all adds up to a pretty dang forgettable day, with the exception of 2 very long runs that made the difference in the game.
Yeah, 12 of his 33 carries gained 2 yards or fewer. That's usually not a recipe for a great day, unless you tack an 86-yard touchdown on the end of it.
And that 86-yard touchdown saved Josh McDaniels' bacon.
Oh, yes.
Because Josh McDaniels made some curious decisions in this game.
That's a very friendly way to put it.
I'm not too critical of the end of regulation, because Vegas started the end of regulation on its own 9 with 40 seconds left. And they ran 2 plays and that was it. And yes, they did have 2 timeouts, but it is hard to score from your own 9 in 40 seconds.
I would have loved to see them take at least 1 shot, but I can understand the logic about sitting on it and playing for overtime.
The bigger problem is the 56-yard field goal in overtime on 4th and 2. Because here's the thing. 56-yard field goals are hard. You are going to convert 4th and 2 more often, probably, than you are going to hit. I don't have the exact numbers, but you are probably going to convert 4th and 2 more often than you are going to hit a 56-yard field goal. And by the way, if you hit that 56-yard field goal, the other team still gets the ball back because you
Yes.
had the ball first in overtime. So I ran the numbers through the Edge Sports Simulator, and it's amazing. Our numbers actually like punting the ball better than a
Yep.
field goal. They said 52% chance of winning if you go for it, 39% if you punt, 36% if you try a field goal.
It was baffling at the time, especially we've seen, coaches get so much criticism for attempting long field goals this year that they would trot him out, that they would trot out the kicker in that situation. That's when I thought that this game's going to end in a tie, because I didn't trust Seattle to be actually get anything on the ground there. That's when I thought this game is going to go the full 10 minutes. We're not going to get anything here. It's going to be, we're going to be just poking fun at these teams all day, because the odds against them are just so massive. When punting is the better option, punting. Yeah.
See, that there's a lot going on here. The most important thing is, in the current overtime rules, if you kick a field goal in the opening possession, the other team still gets the ball and a chance to beat you. That's bad. Kicking a field goal on the first drive is not a good thing. I think the announcers were calling it a game-winning field goal, and I was like, no, this is not a game-winning field goal. They will not win the game if they kick this. We talked about this with Nathaniel Hackett in week 1. It's in Seattle. You don't get to see a lot of long field goals in Seattle, and this was even longer than the Broncos kick was. It was only 4th and 2. As we've discussed, Josh Jacobs was not reliable, but he was getting some good runs. You had options. You had frankly, both offenses were rolling in this game, scoring 30-some points. It was an offensive game, so kicking this is the thing I don't think people understand. If the field goal had been good, at that point, you would probably still expect the Seahawks to at least rally and tie, if not win. There was a lot of points flying around back and forth, and 3 points was probably not going to be enough to win. So it boggled my mind. It made no sense. It felt like the easy way out. It was a Josh McDaniels decision.
And then even with the 3 and out, they got pinned deep in their own territory with little time left. So even failing,
Yes.
even though they got the ball back, you would still expect a tie at that point.
They
in
needed
time.
one outstanding, rare, explosive play, and you cannot count on 86-yard touchdown runs.
No. It's almost like he was playing for the tie, which doesn't make sense when you're way out of the playoff race. You need wins. Ties. If you're on the fringe of the wild card hunt and you're just trying to maintain ground, fine. But if the Raiders have any shot of getting back into this, they need victories, not ties.
And they got one. They got one.
Yeah, they ended up getting one.
But bigger in the NFC race than the AFC. But hey, you know what? Sometimes you make all the wrong calls, and it still comes out right for you in the end.
They're still pretty out of it, though. It's still pretty much 9-team race, 9 teams, 7 spots. 9 teams, 7 spots.
Yeah. Now, they were not the only team that got a late, close, last-minute, if not last-second win. We saw multiple teams score what could have been game-tying touchdowns, only instead of kicking the extra point to force overtime, they opted to go for 2 in the win right away. And for those of us who are fans of exciting football, the good news is both won, and hopefully teams will be more aggressive in the future.
Yeah, it's a very rare play. I'm not quite sure I have found all of them, but I believe these were only the 11th and 12th game-winning 2-point conversions in NFL history since the 2-point conversion was brought back in 1994. I'm talking 2 points in the last 2 minutes to take the lead when they could have had the tie. Where also, I should point out, the other team didn't come back and win, because there are a couple of cases where someone did this with like a minute and a half left. And
there's a big difference between scoring 2 to go up with a minute left, and scoring 2 to go up with 6 seconds left. In fact, people talk about this with analytics, and they assume this is some sort of an analytics decision. It's not an analytics decision. The analytics almost always say it's basically a toss-up based on how good you think your 2-point play is and how much you think your chances are of winning in overtime. But where analytics do make say is that if there's a minute or a minute and a half left, analytics actually prefer the extra point, because you don't want to give your opponent a reason to be aggressive and try to come back and beat you in regulation. But with like 6 seconds left, it's basically a toss-up. But these coaches decided they wanted to be aggressive and they wanted to end the game, and they did.
That's what happened in week 1. When the Giants had their game-winning 2-point conversion against the Titans, but the Titans got the ball back and marched down for it. It was like, I think it was like a long, I think it was a 40-something yard field goal. It was a
And then
makeable
missed that
goal.
field goal. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it almost happened here with the few seconds the Ravens. We should mention the Jaguars beat the Ravens, the Chargers beat the Cardinals. These are the two games we're talking about. But after the Jaguars got the 2-pointer to go up 1, the Ravens took however many seconds they had, and they got into position for Justin Tucker to try a 67-yarder. And I think that would have been a record, but it's Justin Tucker, and he can do this. It's a non-zero odds, non-zero chance of him hitting this field goal and beating you. So it almost backfired on Jacksonville, and fortunately for them, he didn't nail it quite perfectly.
Yeah, he was about 3 yards short.
Yeah, they got the win.
What does it say about Justin Tucker that I think that everyone was thinking this is going to go through? This is going to be a great moment. Because how many kickers in the league giving you the chance?
I thought it was going to go through.
Yeah. When it was, he had the accuracy. His leg was just a little bit short. He's human. Turns out he's not robo kicker.
Boca Chico, I think it was 52 consecutive fourth quarter field goals. Like, the man does not miss unless you make him try to do something that literally no one has ever done before.
Right.
And I'll point out that these 2 games with the 2-point conversions were the 2 games this week that had a reverse post-game win expectancy, which is according to the play-by-play of the game and the number of plays, the number of penalties. You would have expected Baltimore to beat Jacksonville 87% of the time, and you would have expected Arizona to beat the Chargers 74% of the time. But instead, it's the Jaguars and the Chargers who took home the wins.
And that kind of backs up the decision to go for the 2-point conversion and the win right there.
Because you're getting outplayed on the day. If you're getting outplayed on the day, you're more likely to be outplayed in overtime, especially Jacksonville versus Baltimore. Baltimore is a better team. You want to not go to overtime because the chances, the more likely that Baltimore will beat you in overtime, it's more than a 50-50 shot because they're a better team. So you want to end it in regulation.
That's what as close as analytics gets to answering that question. If the other team's better than you, try to maximize variance. Try to give put it on one play when you have when you've been the one just marching down the field.
So a few more notes here about these Jaguars and Chargers before we move on. Historic win for the Jaguars and some historic stat achievement for Justin Herbert.
This was the first win in Jaguars history when they were trailing by 7 or more points in the final minute of regulation. They've never had a last-second game-winning touchdown to go to overtime and whatnot. So despite this being a poor season for the Jaguars on record, they're 4-7. They still have a better point differential than the 9-2 Vikings. So we're going to be in this boat next year where we're going to predict the Jaguars to do better just based on what we've seen from them this year. And we'll see if they can actually finally live up to that.
Yep, the Jaguars are better in point differential and DVOA than both the Vikings and the 7-4 Giants.
Meanwhile, with a baseball fan once about why this mattered or didn't matter, and I was trying to explain to him, wins and losses matter, but what it tells you is that teams like the Jaguars, if they play just a little bit better on the field, you will see a dramatic improvement in their win-loss record, and that's kind of the way to look at it. It doesn't mean the Jaguars are better than the Vikings. It just means they're a slight improvement in on-field production will result in a massive improvement.
Well, it suggests that they may be better than the Vikings in the future. That's the thing. Wins and losses matter in the past.
Yes.
But this is about trying to predict the future. Bill Parcells famously said, "You are what you are. You are what your record says you are." Yeah. But that's not true. What's true is you were what you were.
Yes.
Wins and losses on the scoreboard do not change. You cannot go back and be like, we outplayed you and we had more yards and whatever. It doesn't matter. The wins and losses are what matters in the past, but not in the future. If we want to predict the future, all these other stats teach us a lot more than wins and losses.
And everyone but Vikings fans today can probably get behind that. Right. The quick note on the other game, Justin Herbert threw 3 touchdown passes, now up to 88 for his career. only Dan Marino has thrown more in his first 3 seasons. Herbert needs 10 touchdown passes over the last 6 weeks in order to catch Marino for that.
Herbert will absolutely get it. He will set the record, and then we will discover who understands or doesn't understand the concept of era adjustment.
Yeah.
We're finally at the point where all these early Marino records are beginning to fall, and it only took 35 years, right?
Right, yeah. All right, we have a few other news notes here as we hit 4th down in our notes. Big day for the New York Jets and a big day for Mike White. Brian, talk to me a little bit about what White did for the Jets in their win over Chicago.
Mike White has 2 career 300-yard passing games in 4 starts. Zach Wilson has 1 career 300-yard passing game in 20 starts. Mike White had 3 passing touchdowns against the Bears. Not only has Wilson never thrown for 3 touchdowns in a game, he has just 4 passing touchdowns in 2022. Mike White had more passing yards and touchdowns in the first half than Zach Wilson had in his last 2 games combined. The Jets had the best offensive DVOA in the league this week at 52.3%. The best game of Wilson's career had the Jets at only 33.1%. We could say all we want about how the Chicago Bears have a terrible, terrible pass defense, and it was worse even than our numbers might suggest because they had 2 starting corners out with concussions and another one who left in the middle of the game. And yes, Mike White was hitting a lot of open receivers who just were not covered. But Zach Wilson wasn't hitting open receivers who weren't covered. Zach Wilson was what Mike White was able to do in the same kind of situations that Zach Wilson did was miles beyond.
I think the problem is the people assuming that Mike White is going to do this every week now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was just 1 game. There's a reason the guy's a career backup. Consider who he was playing against. That does not mean there's a difference between Mike White is a real live NFL starting quarterback and Mike White is better than Zach Wilson.
Yeah, this is far more referendum on what Wilson has not been able to do.
Yes.
I mean, Garrett Wilson now has 4 touchdowns on the year. 2 of them came this game from White, and 2 of them came from Joe Flacco when Wilson missed the beginning of the year. Zach Wilson has not hooked up with them at all. He's got these weapons, and Wilson just was not able to connect with any of them.
Yes.
With all the good a lot of good teams playing on Thanksgiving, the Sunday slate was kind of watered down. So I had this game on one of my screens, but was not paying close attention to it until the 4th quarter. But I was cheering so hard for Mike White to get his 4th touchdown pass and tie Zach Wilson on the season in his 1 start. But it didn't quite happen. But I suspect it will happen sooner rather than later here as we go forward.
I mean, is there any way you go back to Zach Wilson after this? I mean,
no, not unless White gets knocked out. And frankly, at that point, I'd probably go back to Joe Flacco. Zach Wilson has been. There's no other word for it. He's been incompetent. He is below the baseline competence needed to play quarterback in the NFL. Robert Saleh's quote after the game about Mike White was just, he made the easy look easy.
Yes.
And Zach Wilson made the easy look impossible.
There's no reason to go back to Zach Wilson ever, because not this year, unless both Flacco and White get hurt. And the Jets absolutely have to look for another quarterback in the offseason. We all know which one we think they're getting, which is Jimmy Garoppolo.
I pity Jets fans for the upcoming Garoppolo versus Wilson quarterback battle we'll be dealing with during training camp next year.
Jimmy Garoppolo was better than Zach Wilson.
Oh, much better than Zach Wilson. Still, as a connoisseur of the Jimmy Garoppolo experience, it's not something I particularly wish on very many other fan bases.
It's way better than the Zach Wilson experience.
Well, speaking of
the 49ers, am I good at transitions or what?
it's like you're a professional radio guy or something. The San Francisco 49ers, their defense has been on fire lately, especially in the second half of games. Brian, talk to me a little bit about what they're doing after halftime here.
They have not allowed a single second half point in their last 4 games. That ties the record since 1940, and football became remotely watchable. So ever since they got blown out against the Chiefs, they have not allowed a single second half point. The only other teams to do that in the 21st century, the Patriots last year, the 2009 Broncos, and the 2002 Buccaneers. So some very solid defenses there. The all-time record, in case you're wondering if the Niners have a chance at that, is 13 by the 1920-21 Akron Pros, because 1920s football was super exciting, you guys. That streak includes 3 0-0 ties.
World Cup fever, baby.
There are exciting 0-0 ties, and then there's 1920s football. They are a world apart.
I like that the Saints had gone 332 games without being shut out, which was the active longest streak and the fourth longest streak in history. It was the first time the Saints had been shut out since 2001, also against the 49ers. And the new leader is the Steelers, who have not been shut out in 256 games. And the all-time leader is the 49ers, who were not shut out in 420 games from 1977 to 2004.
Yeah, I mean that's a record that may never fall. That to be good for decade after decade after decade, just always getting something. It's almost impossible to conceive.
Yeah. Turns out Bill Walsh was a very good coach, and the men who followed him were also good coaches, and their team has showed up at least a little bit every single week.
I just think about the Patriots and their streak, in their dynasty, but the Patriots were shut out in the first week of 2003.
Yeah.
And the Patriots were shut out in Jacoby Brissett's second start for the Bills in 2016. So they don't even come close to this 49ers.
Yeah, because all it takes is one game where you're forced the backup quarterback in there, and everything goes away. And to be fair, the Saints could have easily scored in this game. They were at the goal line multiple times, and the Niners managed to have those goal line stops. The Niners were a little fortunate not to allow any points against the Saints in the second half.
A little bit of fumble recovery luck there.
A little fumble recovery, a big sack on fourth down when they, Saints could have kicked a meaningless field goal just to extend their streak. So there were a couple fortunate plays, and as good as the Niners have been over this 4-game stretch, they don't actually have the best defensive DVOA over the past month, either overall or just in the second half. Both the Jets and the Patriots have actually been a little bit better by our numbers. But the Niners do have the best overall DVOA since week 8. They're at 51.8%, because they're also second on offense. The only team better than them on offense is the Miami Dolphins, who they get to play this week in a game I'm looking forward to and am terrified of in equal measure.
It is a monster game. All the so many people in Miami who used to play or coach for San Francisco, and Raheem Mostert this week, talking about how he felt pressure to get back on the field before he felt comfortable doing it. And I heard that quote, and I think about how the 49ers have the most injured players every year. And I wonder if that's part of it. And it could be. It's at this point, it is a legitimate potential Super Bowl preview. So, yeah, that's the biggest game we've seen in a while in the NFL. Before we move on, we have a question here from Useful Title, we're talking about Jimmy Garoppolo, Zach Wilson quarterback battle. And he says, wasn't it Zach Wilson the 49ers were trying to trade up for, but they could only get up to third for Trey Lance? Brian, I think you would know this better than I would as the resident 49ers fan, but it's murky.
Yeah, there are conflicting stories about this, because
Yes.
Some people say yes, absolutely they were looking for Zach Wilson, but some people were saying they were absolutely looking for Mac Jones. They kept this very close to the vest the whole time. I think they would have taken Lance over Wilson, but that's based mostly just on things they've like reading the tea leaves of things they said before and after. Because I think they were looking for the more high potential, as opposed to Wilson, who had the one good year against the pandemic. I think they would have taken Wilson if Lance had gone second. I do think they would have taken him over Mac Jones. I think they would have taken him over Justin Fields, because quarterback evaluation is a crapshoot at this point in time, and who knows what's what. I do not believe the Niners were trading up for Wilson, because I believe they would have. I believe they would. They knew what the Jets were doing, because remember the Jets had just imported the 49ers coaching staff essentially, so they had a good idea who the Jets wanted before they traded up to number 3.
And that was not a trade made during the draft. It was made weeks or maybe even a month beforehand. So they knew who might and might not be available. And if there was one guy they really, really were targeting, they would have found a way to trade up to 1 or 2 and got him. And they didn't. So they went to 3 and they got Lance, and here we are.
Yeah, they still have that mystery box thing on the sideline. Who knows what's in the mystery box?
Schrodinger's quarterback. He's both a star and a bust.
I'll point out the useful title also points out that it's a bad year for quarterbacks with the last name Wilson, both Zach and Russell. And the Broncos are now at 14.3 points per game, which is the worst since the 2000 Browns. And it's gotten to the point where the defense is actively yelling at Russell Wilson on the sidelines. And Russell Wilson has played like the easiest schedule of opposing defenses this year, and he's been this bad. Like he's actually been worse than you think.
Yeah, he hasn't been the worst quarterback in the league, but when you add in his contract and all the expectations and all the let's ridiness that he brings with him, I mean, I've got that keep chopping wood quarterback already kind of written at this point in time. Yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah. No, it's not gone well. And I for one, and maybe I'm naive, I don't know, but I buy the explanation both guys had after the game that I believe it's Mike Purcell who's the one seen yelling at Wilson, but he was trying to encourage him. He was not chewing him out. He wasn't scolding him. He wasn't cursing him out. And that's their post-game story. I tend to believe them. Maybe I'm naive again, but honestly, it doesn't matter. The thing is, it doesn't matter. They stink. They suck. It's unacceptable in Wilson's own words. And my wife happens to have a friend who's a Broncos fan who texted my wife and said, "Ask Vinny what's wrong with the Broncos." And rather than dictate an answer, I said, "Just hand me your phone." And I've got a
their defense isn't playing as well in the last couple of weeks either.
No, Patrick Surtain's fallen off. They get DJ Moore had a huge game against him. When you have big passing numbers to the Panthers, this is an issue.
Yeah, but Russell Wilson should not be being out quarterback dueled by Sam Darnold. That is not a sentence that should happen.
No.
Although Sam Darnold's performance this week is a reminder to Jets fans not to crown Mike White yet, because random things can happen in 1 week.
Yeah. And it's been the story all year, literally since week 1. The Broncos beat the Seahawks in week 1. If their running backs just hang on to the ball at the goal line, that's all they need to do. Hang on the ball at the goal line to get a win. But they didn't do it that night, and they have hardly done it since. They are last in the league in offensive red zone DVOA. And at some point, I don't know if we've done this yet, we're going to have to look up the worst team ever in that split, because I have to imagine Denver's threatening.
We have. They're not quite there, but they're down with it's like the Phoenix Cardinals from 1993 and the Rams from 2016, like the Keith Null era Rams. It's really bad.
Yeah.
It's certainly no one with the expectations the Broncos had coming into the season has ever looked this bad. I think we can say that fairly definitively, I think.
Yes.
I mean, the Broncos, they got a prime Christmas Day game. I think it's Broncos Rams.
The Christmas Day schedule, it turns out, sucks.
Yeah. It didn't suck in August, but everything that could have gone wrong has.
The Grinch football.
Week 15, they have to move some games to Saturday, and they can move some good stuff around. But week 16, Christmas, the Christmas games, you can't move those around, and they suck.
Well, speaking of holidays, as Aaron's run of great segues continues here, we had some great football on Thanksgiving, some exciting football on Thanksgiving. The Cowboys got a big win, and Micah Parsons continues to shine.
Micah Parsons had yet another multi-sack day. They only come in bunches for him. He's the third player to have 12 or more sacks in his first 2 seasons, joining Aldon Smith and Reggie White. And he's now had 2 sacks in 6 games. He's 2 short of Reggie White's record of 8, set back in 1987. We're watching him try to gain that. It's very weird, because in 6 games, Parsons has 2 sacks each. And he has no sacks in any other games. He does not have a single sack a game yet.
I have not watched a ton of Cowboys games. Are they still shifting him to linebacker a lot or leaving him at edge rusher?
Less.
He's playing more edge rusher this year than last year. I know because I actually asked Sports Info Solutions about that because I was curious, where am I going to vote for Micah Parsons for the All-Pro team? And this year he's going to be an edge rusher, not a linebacker.
Okay.
But they also bring him up the middle a lot, where they line him up at like inside linebacker and then blitz him.
Okay.
Yeah, the Pro Bowl ballot has moved him to outside linebacker this year as opposed to inside linebacker last year. So we no longer have to decide between him and Fred Warner and pretend they play the same position.
Well, the at least last year they did.
Yeah, last year they sort of did sometimes. I mean, that's the thing
Yeah.
is last year Micah Parsons played two positions.
And he was better at edge rusher, and I'm glad the Cowboys figured that out. I really do think that he is significantly better as a pass rusher than he is as a coverage guy.
And that's a more important position in the NFL in 2022. If you can have a great edge rusher or a great off-ball linebacker, you're taking the edge rusher 10 times out of 10.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other Thanksgiving interesting stat, Justin Jefferson now has the most receiving yards for any player in his first 3 seasons, passing Randy Moss.
Yep.
And he's neck and neck with Tyreek Hill for the lead in receiving DYAR and actual receiving yards. And it's going to be a really interesting choice, I think, for Offensive Player of the Year between Hill and Jefferson.
Yeah, at the midway point, it looked like Hill was running away with this. But
but now Jefferson's really caught up with him. And Jefferson makes as many amazing catches as Hill makes ones where you're like, oh, my God, he's all alone out there. How fast is that guy? Jefferson makes ones where you're like contested catches where you're like, how on earth did he get that ball?
Yeah.
It's a matter of preference as to style there. You can make stronger. They're 1A and 1B right now at the position.
And I'll point out for the Vikings, for the people who are watching and following our Vikings numbers, the Vikings are now 22nd in DVOA, and they are the first 9-2 team to ever be negative, and they're over 10 percentage points behind any other 9-2 team in DVOA history.
And I will point out, Vikings fans, you can clinch the division this week.
There's still a good chance they beat the Jets. Yeah, I would favor the Jets, but I mean, I think there's like a 55% chance the Jets win this game. Like, there's still a really good chance the Vikings beat the Jets.
A win and a Detroit loss would clinch the NFC North, and that would tie the record for earliest division win in the Super Bowl history. Every other team that's clinched with 5 weeks left are like, they're some of the best teams of all times. You have the 2009 Colts, you have the 2007 Patriots, the 2004 Eagles, one of the late Niners teams, the 85 Bears, the 73 Vikings. Usually when a team is clinching a division this early, it's because, well, yes, the division is terrible, but they're also like one of an all-time great kind of team. The Vikings are not.
They're cuckoo. It's crazy.
When we talk about elimination or clinching scenarios, at this point, it's usually things that we all know are going to happen. Like, surprise, surprise, the Bears could get eliminated this week. Huge shock. But our playoff odds still say there's only a 98.6% chance the Vikings win the division, despite the fact that they can do it this week. The Vikings would have to basically lose out to not win the division, and DVOA is going, well, they're bad. There's a chance. We give the Eagles a 100% chance to make the playoffs.
I'm going to look terrible if they win the Super Bowl.
The game of football is going to look terrible if the Minnesota Vikings win the Super Bowl. If they somehow manage to turn this string of good luck and close wins into a run against, beating the Eagles, beating the 49ers, beating the Chiefs, the Bills, it's going to be the least explicable thing, I think, in modern NFL history.
Yes.
So you mentioned the Vikings have a chance to clinch the division this week. The Eagles have a chance to clinch clinch the division or clinch a playoff berth?
Just clinch a playoff spot.
Okay.
Everyone in the division's good. They can't clinch that quite yet.
Yeah. But they can do it here. If they win and the Commanders, Seahawks, and 49ers all lose, that would clinch a playoff berth for your Philadelphia Eagles. The second earliest playoff clinch in the Super Bowl area behind the 1990 New York Giants, the team that won the Super Bowl with Jeff Hostetler.
Second earliest playoff clinch for any team or for the NFC East in particular?
I believe that's for any team. I will triple check.
So the Vikings also could do that if they clinch this week.
Yes, absolutely. The Vikings are a little more impressive because they would tie the record for division wins, but just for playoff wins, they would be in a bigger tie for second place.
I also have to point this out because Brian figured it out. So all points to Brian on this. There are 16,384 possible scenarios in the NFC North, and the Vikings win in 16,281 of them.
That is excluding ties, because I didn't do all 4 million and change situations of ties. But yes, I dug out every single way the Lions or Packers could still take this from them. It's very low.
The other stuff I want to point out, because I did it with the playoff odds. The NFC South is now won by a team with a losing record in 34% of our simulations. There's still a 17% chance the entire NFC East makes the postseason, and a 15% chance that the entire AFC East makes the postseason. And both divisions have an over 50% chance of all the teams having winning records.
That Giants Commanders game this week is huge.
It's colossal.
Yeah.
Huge.
And who would have thought that a month ago?
Yeah.
Yes, the Commanders now have better playoff odds by DVOA than the Giants, because they have a better DVOA than the Giants.
I also suspect it's because of that Eagles win. Because if
Right.
they end up tied,
sure.
The Commanders are probably going to have a better division record than the Giants if they end up tied at 9-8 or something, and it's going to be because of that huge upset of the Eagles. That is a massive tiebreaker at this point in time. That only really matters if they split the games. And the Commanders' next 2 games are both against the Giants, so we'll find out a lot more in 3 weeks about who's coming out of that.
The Commanders go Giants by Giants.
Yes, which is
That's so weird.
Piece of
Yes,
That's like a 1930s barnstorming schedule.
I don't know how they managed to schedule it that way, but there we go. Go Akron Pros, another Akron Pros.
Yeah.
Finally, we should end with our weekly Kansas City Chiefs are great stats. And I will point out that if people want the DVOA article that I'm going to put up after the show is over, I'm going to go into why DVOA differs from EPA when it comes to the Chiefs. But that doesn't mean they're not great, because they are.
Here we go.
Patrick Mahomes now has 38 games with over 300 passing yards. That is the most for any player in their first 7 seasons. And Mahomes is only in his 6th season, and he only played 1 game as a rookie. But wait, it gets better.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce now has the most receiving yards for any tight end in his first 11 seasons. But it's his 10th season, and he did not catch a pass as a rookie. So Kelce has done more in 9 seasons than any other tight end has ever done in 11.
The Chiefs and volume, they go really well together.
And excitement and points and like
The
everything.
Chiefs and tight ends. If only the Chiefs had a great tight end in the 60s or 70s. And then they could be like the legendary team of tight ends. Because between Gonzalez and Kelce, they have dominated the tight end position for 25 years.
Yeah.
But I don't know any great Kansas City tight ends before that.
Not particularly, no.
There was a very short list of great tight ends before like the 1990s. They're not.
No, but I mean, if only they had someone like Ditka or John Mackey
They
or
were around.
What's his name from Washington? Jerry Smith.
Yeah.
Or something like someone like that or Browns.
Ozzie Newsome.
Right?
Todd
Yeah, if one of those
Christensen.
guys had been a Kansas City guy.
Kellen Winslow.
Yeah,
That one.
Yeah.
There were great tight ends before Tony Gonzalez, but they did not play for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah. Before Kellen Winslow, they were big tackles who could occasionally catch. They did the modern tight end really spawned with Air Coryell and whatnot.
It would be interesting to go back, if DVOA could go back into the 60s and 70s and see what it would say about Mackey and Ditka. Like, if you era adjusted them, would they come out similar to Kelce and Gronk? Because, if you adjusted for just how low tight end numbers were overall then compared to, did they dominate the position to the same extent?
My guess is it would be similar to if we had it for the pre-World War II, and with Don Hudson for the Packers, and his numbers are so off the charts compared to everyone else, he would blow. The baselines would be so low that he would be so far above the baseline it would break the scale.
Yeah. You put a modern-ish, production against old-timey numbers, you blow everything right out of the water.
Well, if your season-long fantasy teams have been blown out of the water, I have good news for you. You can go play on Underdog Fantasy with us and double your first deposit up to $100 with promo code OUTSIDERS. You can play Underdog's Battle Royale, a fast 6-round weekly fantasy football draft with easier chances to win than traditional daily fantasy sports sites. You can even win $50,000 if you grab first place. Or you can try their pick'em games where you can easily pick players' chances to go higher or lower than their projected stat lines, even in states where traditional prop betting currently isn't available. Underdog is the fastest growing fantasy site around. Join the fun over at underdogfantasy.com or download Underdog in the App Store and use promo code OUTSIDERS now to double your first deposit up to $100. It's basically free money, people. Come on now, free money. And while you're signing up for Outsiders, please also sign up for FO Plus. While you're signing up for Underdog, also sign up for FO Plus at footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. You get NFL
I believe
betting
we
picks.
still have the Black Friday sale, I think.
Oh, great news.
25% off an FO Plus subscription right now. And quarterback pass by direction numbers should be coming by tomorrow.
Oh my goodness, that's more data we get. You get NFL betting picks, fantasy advice, premium stats such as quarterback passing by direction. And I know a lot of people love this, an ad-free experience. All for you at FO Plus. It's Black Friday. There's never a better time to give us a try. And last but not least, I want to invite everyone to join us on the Football Outsiders Discord for in-game conversation every Sunday and very often during the Monday, Thursday, and upcoming Saturday games in the NFL slate. You can communicate with us, the writers of Football Outsiders, and let us know how you feel. So that is going to do it for today. I want to thank Aaron and Brian for joining. I want to thank Ross for helping us produce the show. Mostly, I want to thank you, the listeners, because you're the reason we're here. So that was fun, everybody. Let's do it again next week.